Hi, I'm Willie with H5 Technology and welcome to my channel. Thank you for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. The first thing you might notice is I'm sitting a little further back from the camera. I've had a couple comments about how close I sit to the camera, so I wanted to take a step back, and if you notice and you like this a little bit better than when I sit closer, please let me know down in the comments. Second thing, you can see how red my forehead is. Summer is here in Illinois, and yesterday we hit somewhere between 95 and 100 now. For certain parts of the country, certain parts of the world, that's nothing, but for here, especially this time of year, that is something else. So, and today is Memorial Day, so we would like to thank everyone whose family and friends have given the ultimate sacrifice to keep us free here in the United States. So we do appreciate that very much. What we're going to talk about today is extensions on our UCM, and we're going to take a look at this. So let's hop over to it. Right now we're logged into the lab UCM that we've been working with. This is the one we ran the wizard on, so I will put a link to the video somewhere here to go back and take a look at the other video if you missed that. So we're logged in. We're going to go down to extension trunk. We're going to go to extensions. Now this is the default set of extensions. Remember, we created 5 extensions, and it created them 1000 through 1004. And we have a lot of options here, and you can see status here is unavailable. Presence status, we're going to talk about that in a minute. The extension number, caller ID name, how many messages you have, the terminal type, IP import, and email status. So let's take a look at this first extension, extension 1000. We pull this up. Here's the first thing that we see, and one of the things we need to talk about real quick with the extensions and the UCM are permissions. Now when I drop down this permissions list, you're going to see internal, local, national, and international. And what you're thinking is, oh, that probably talks about, back in the Cisco days, we talked about partitions. And partitions were setting it up so that phones could only call certain ways. Other systems call it call restrictions, all kinds of things. So that is not what this is, but you can set it up that way. So I do think that the naming convention here causes possibly some confusion if you've looked at other systems, or if you're just used to the way that we refer to the types of phone numbers that are available. Internal, which would be your 4-digit, local, but that's not what this is. This is the nomenclature that Grandstream uses, and it does not denote that this phone can only make internal calls, or that it can only make local calls, national calls, or international calls. This is just the nomenclature for permissions that we will apply later to trunks and routes. So keep that in mind, that we are going to define these as we go through this series, that this does not mean that this phone can only make local calls, only make internal calls, national calls, international calls. It may end up that we create our routes and such that's how it works, but by default that's not what it is. This is just simply their nomenclature. So after we run through the wizard, the default permission on the extensions is going to be local. So here we can specify a caller ID number. So, and it says right there, configure the caller ID number displayed in dialing calls from this user. The caller ID usage might be limited by your voice over IP provider. So if your dial tone provider, whether it's SIP.US or another provider, if they don't allow you to pass through certain caller ID information, this may be limited. Okay, so our SIP IAX password. It created the random passwords, and this is the password that is used to authenticate to the UCM from whatever device, whether it's a Grandstream phone or a Cisco phone or a Polycom phone, you name a SIP phone. This is the password that you use along with the extension number or the auth ID. So, and it says right here, this is the SIP service subscriber's ID used for authentication. If this is not configured, you use the extension. So when we're setting up a phone, if we don't have the auth ID configured, it defaults back to the extension, which in this case would be 1000. Here under voicemail, we can enable local voicemail, enable remote voicemail, or disable voicemail altogether. I do have a couple systems that I'm working on where these systems are only live when people are at events, so it travels around. So they've disabled voicemail, so there is no voicemail. You could also do that, but it all depends on your use case. Now here is the voicemail password, and you can see it generated a random password for the voicemail. You can skip the voicemail password verification. So it says when user dials my voicemail, the password verification IVR is skipped, so you do not get prompted for a password. Here we have the option to send voicemail to email. So we'll have to go in and configure an SMTP server. So and actually, if you call me at the phone that's behind me on my system and you leave me a voicemail, I actually get an email and it has a WAV file of the voicemail attached. I really kind of like that. That way I don't have to dial in remote to the system. And so if I'm at lunch or whatever, I can download the WAV file to my phone, listen to it, and when I'm calling back later in the evening, I have some idea of what I'm getting into without listening to the voicemail on the phone. Keep voicemail after emailing. So what you can do is you can tell it yes to keep the voicemail after you've emailed, or no, and the default I believe is yes, because it still does keep it after it is emailed. You can enable the keep alive. You can completely disable the extension, and the keep alive frequency is by default 60 seconds. So the PBX will send SIP options to make sure that the device is online. And if we check that box, then the keep alive frequency comes alive and we can change that. I probably wouldn't change it. I don't know. It's going to depend on your situation, but 60 seconds, 1 minute seems like a very reasonable amount of time for that. Also, if we don't want, let's go back up here, if we do not want the extension to be the auth ID, we would fill in an auth ID right here. So if you don't want your usernames and passwords to be your extension, remember you need to come in here and fill out that auth ID. Under user extensions, this is where we're going to put our first name and our last name, and this is where we're going to fill out an email address, and then a user password. So what is the user password for? It is so the users can log into the UCM and look at the options that they have available there. We will be getting to that. Language by default is English, and then I'm not sure exactly if this is Chinese simplified. If somebody knows exactly what this language is, please put it down there. I have not messed with anything besides English at this point. Concurrent registrations. How many different endpoints, how many different devices can this extension be registered to simultaneously? And by default, that is set to 1. And then here is where you would put in a mobile phone number. And then we can save these options and apply that. So now you can see once this reloads that I still have a status unavailable because there's no endpoint that is currently registered with that extension. Presence status, we're going to talk about that here in a second, but you can see it changed the caller ID name to Willie Howe. Now we're going to go into media, and this screen has a lot of options, and NAT tells us to turn this on when the PBX is using public IP and communicating with devices behind NAT. This is selected by default. Can direct media. By default, the PBX will route the media streams from SIP endpoints through itself. If this option is enabled, the PBX will attempt to negotiate the endpoints to route the media streams directly, bypassing the PBX. It is not always possible for the PBX to negotiate endpoint-to-endpoint media routing. So right now, this is set to no. So it is not going to direct the media for extension 1000. DTMF mode. So if you are wanting to know what DTMF is, and right here it says the default is RFC 2833, and then you've got info, in-band, and auto. DTMF is dual tone multi-frequency signaling, and that is what allows us to not have to have operators to switch calls and things like that. Is basically working in the background to make sure that things get switched the way they need to. Alert info. When present in an invite request, the alert info header specifies an alternative ringtone to the UAS. So you can have different ringtones here. Fax mode, we can have fax detection or none. So you can have the UCM can handle faxing features for end users. Faxed email is enabled, so this user can get a fax, and you can set up fax extensions per user. Here's T.38, so the T.38, that is your faxing standard. SRTP, enable, disable SRTP for stream encryption. So if we have SRTP enabled, our stream, our RSTP, our RTP audio stream will be encrypted. The strategy here is to allow, right now it's allow all, but we can allow local subnet only or specific IP addresses to register this this extension. So if we do local subnet only, we can actually add more local subnets that are allowed to register to this extension. For now, we're going to allow all. And then I'm going to do an entire video on codecs. So right now, we are not going to talk about the codecs. We're going to leave this at default. There's going to be an entire video on codec. We're going to go through those, talk about their options, the advantages, disadvantages, and things like that. So right now, we will not talk about codecs. Just if you're using Grandstream phones and your UCM, you can probably go ahead and leave this default. You can probably go ahead and leave it default anyway, but there will be an entire video just on codecs. So we're going to hop over here to features. Now, we talked about the presence status that we saw back here, right here. So right here it says available. But if we edit this, come back in here to features, presence status, available. Okay, so now this is going to start making a little bit more sense to you. So if I click away on this and I click save, right here you can see that the presence status for extension 1000 is now away. You can come back in here and set it to do not disturb. And if do not disturb is enabled, all incoming calls will be dropped. All call forward settings will be ignored. We'll save this, but you can see as I'm changing the presence status of this line that it is changing. So what is happening is that every time we change the presence status, you get an entirely different set of options underneath that you can configure, right? So under away, here is the options that we get. Under chat, here are the, yep, we understand that. And then you have a custom presence and you have an unavailable. So under, you can configure these options under the presence status for each presence status. So you can have right here different things happening based on your presence status. So what does that mean? If I am away, I can have my call forward unconditional send this extension somewhere else. So call forward unconditional means that we're always sending the calls while we're at this present status to whatever we want here. So if we want to do call forward unconditional to voicemail, we can say always send while this present status is selected, and right here it's away, always send calls to voicemail. We can say always send calls to a ring group. Now we're going to talk about ring groups later on. We don't have any of those set up. We can do custom number. We can do a voicemail group. Right now we would just send to voicemail. Call forward unconditional time condition, all the time, and we're going to get into setting up all of these different times as well. There's a lot to setting up a system and getting it running exactly the way you want. Call forward no answer. If we did not use anything here under unconditional, call forward no answer. If we did not answer after a specific amount of time, then it would forward the call on. Call forward busy, same thing. So you want to get in here and you're going to want to play with this presence status and figure it out. You can do a lot of things with this. So by default, our presence status, and you can select the drop down here, or as you saw when I clicked the tab, it changed it here under the drop down. Okay, we can turn on do not disturb. We can do a forward whitelist. The other thing that I really like about the UCM is they have tooltipped everything. So kudos to Grandstream. Tooltips are huge. Like if you get stuck, and you've seen me here a couple of times reading the tooltips, just because it's sometimes their explanation is better than my explanation. So calls from users in the forward whitelist will not be forwarded. So let's say that your partner, your life partner, is calling you. What you can do is you can put that phone number in here, you can put an extension in here or whatever, and while that number is on the whitelist, they'll not be forwarded. It'll still ring through to your extension. The CC box, check this box to allow the system to automatically alert this extension when a called party is available, given that a previous call to that party failed for some reason. Now we've got this ring simultaneously option. So if you want to ring the extension and an external number simultaneously, check this box. So you can ring the internal extension and an external number. So you could put a number where you're going to be reached. I don't know if that's 7 or not. And then time condition for ring simultaneously all the time. And then use the caller's DOD number as caller ID on the outgoing, forwarding, or ring simultaneously. You can see that is unchecked. We're going to uncheck that for now. Now, this is a very controversial option. Allow call barging. And so their tooltip here is fantastic. Members of this list can spy on this extension via feature codes. So what call barge does is call barge allows whoever you specify to be able to hit a feature code on a phone and listen to the phone call, listen to the entire phone call, and the person on extension 1000 has absolutely no idea that that is happening. In some states, I don't know if this is legal in all states. Now, every phone system is going to have a barge option. But the ethics and the legality of it should be considered when setting the system up. So just keep that in mind. Seamless transfer privilege control. So you can do a seamless transfer via the feature codes, and when we get into the phones and we have multiple extensions, we're going to do a lot of these things so you get to see how they work. Other settings, ring timeout, number of seconds to ring the extension before forwarding the call to voicemail. Now, there is a system-wide setting that deals with this. There's a default, and I can't remember off the top of my head if it's like 20 seconds. It might be a minute, might be a full minute. But you can come in here and adjust this to however many seconds you want. I would think that 20 seconds would be a reasonable amount of time. Auto record. If enabled, the calls using this extension or trunk will be automatically recorded. That's another feature that you need to understand the laws in your state. So I'm working with a customer right now where they want to record all inbound calls. And in Illinois, it's kind of a gray area whether we're a two-party state or not. I believe there's some case law happening right now about this. So my suggestion to them was that we should just go ahead. It's not going to take us more than 5 minutes to create the IVR, the inbound IVR. We're going to have an IVR set up that when the calls come in, thank you for calling such and such company. Please, be aware that calls will be recorded for whatever reason. Once that message is announced to the caller, then we're going to forward to a ring group. We're covered then. Everybody knows if you continue the call, the call is going to be recorded. Skip trunk auth. If set to yes, users do not need to enter a password when making outbound calls. If set to buy time, users do not need to enter a password when making outbound calls that matches the time condition. So right now we do not have any trunk authentication set up. Now we will get into that. Some places want users to put in a PIN. Maybe you're in a situation where the departments get charged back for usage, or maybe you just don't want people being able to make calls without a password. All right, so if we have outbound calls set up where they have to have a password, we can put the password in here. Support hot desking mode. If we enable this, there's a couple things that are going to happen. Extension will be used as the auth ID, and the SIP password will only be able to have alphanumeric characters. It won't be able to have any of those special characters. Enable LDAP. So by default, if LDAP is enabled, the UCM is actually running LDAP in the background, and all of the extensions that are created are automatically entered into LDAP. So when you want to do a dynamic phone book for everybody on the system, that's already created. And when we get into our phone templates and our phone options, you're going to see that we can select that phone book, and then on the phone, anybody who's in LDAP, we're going to be able to look them up, because there could be a place where we've got hundreds of extensions. We don't know everybody, we know a name, so we're going to use the phone book and we're going to look that person up. So we'll get into that as well. Enable WebRTC support, enable registration and call from WebRTC. We'll get into that a little later. Music on hold. So there are different music on hold classes that we're going to get into, and by default it uses the default. But you can get your own custom on-hold music, create a new class for the on-hold music. You can then change the default to be your new on-hold music, and it's not uncommon to do this. Or you could upload your on-hold music to the default group. I prefer to create a new group, upload 3 or 4 different on-hold music options that we like, and then select the group for music on hold. Call duration limit, the maximum duration of call blocking. If we select that, then we get an option to fill in how many seconds. Default value, which let's see here. The default value 0 means no limit. You don't see that in there, but if we have this turned on, that limits the length of the phone calls. Custom call info for auto answer. If checked, the invite message sent to the extension will contain a call info header to indicate auto answer. Auto answer. You call, the call is automatically answered, and I'm gonna show you these options once we get the system and we've got a couple phones up and going, but still a couple videos to get there, but we are plowing towards it. And then you can enable call waiting. Under specific time, this is where we can start setting up those time. Oh, we got logged out. We're talking too slow here. So here's where we can start setting up our time restriction. So this is that specific time. So under our call forward unconditional, or call forward no answer, call forward busy, that specific time, if we set that up here like we just did, we'll set it up again, and we could actually just do by week, and this is by weeks. We'll check this. We can go by day again. You really you got to get your hands on one of these. So if we're gonna do June, and we're gonna do Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 30th, 29th, 31st, and this probably makes absolutely no sense because there could be some conflicting information in there, but you can see how flexible this gets. So right now we have this time. So let's go back over to features, and then we have our specific time right here. So our call forward unconditional to, you know, extension or voicemail, we'll do voicemail, 1000 is going to happen during that specific time. So you can really get in there and really fine-tune this thing. I know it seems kind of confusing, but like I said, if you've got a UCM, just play around with it. I'm going to go ahead and delete this again and change this back to all time and none. And then the follow me. So if you do follow me, this is where the system will try to, if you're not at your desk, it will try to reach you at whatever destination you want. And so the default destination is going to be voicemail, external number, and all that. You can down here you can set up multiple follow me numbers. So we're going to set this up. Also, you just need to be aware that it is available, and that you can set it up. Users may ask for this if they don't want to use like the Grandstream app or things like that. They may ask for this feature, and you need to know that it's here and have played with it and be able to configure it. We've used this a couple times. I don't use it that often, but most of the time we're doing like a VPN from a phone, and we'll use the Wave app at this point. And so you've got an extension that is set up, you know, on the iPhone or the Android device. So now the next thing, we're going to cancel these right here. The next thing we're going to do, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and make this extension available. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab a phone real quick, and we are going to configure a phone to connect to the system. So real quick, something else that we are going to talk about is zero config. And on my production system where you all call me, I actually have it set up to do automatic configuration assignment, which means when I send a or when I plug a phone in, it automatically configures it. So I'm unchecking that and unconfiguring that so that when we plug in this phone, we can configure this phone to go to the correct UCM. Otherwise, it's going to grab an extension automatically off of my production system. So I just thought you'd find that interesting, and we're going to get into zero config because it will make your life easy. Alright, so what I have here is a Grandstream GXP 1625 two-line phone. I like these phones. They have a very small footprint. They are a two-line phone, just no frills. I think they're less than $40 a piece. They work with all of the UCM options. The next video that we're going to do, we're going to talk about templates, and we'll get the phones dialed in. We also have to deal with trunks, so we'll probably do trunks so that once you have a phone, you can make some inbound, outbound calls. So we'll deal with that, but then we are also going to look at the phones, auto deployment, and all that good stuff. But for right now, we're going to use this GXP 1625. We're going to plug it in, and I'm going to show you, if you use the wizard and you have everything set up the way we've done, I'm going to show you how easy it is to go ahead and configure this phone. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get it plugged into the network. Now it is PoE on the back. I guess I should show you this. So right here, this is the handset cord. Now the cord comes with the phone. This phone, the 1625, is PoE. So you've got the headset jack. So if you have a headset, this is where that goes. Then you have the power jack if you're going to use that. Then you have the LAN port, which is also going to be the port that provides PoE. And then you have the PC port, which you plug your PC into. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this guy into the network, get him powered up, and then we're going to go ahead and get it on the system. So the phone is currently booting, and it's loading user data. That's what it says on the screen, but it is booting. I've got it back here behind my production phone. So as soon as it's booted up, we will go ahead and oh, it looks like it's ready. So right now it just says account 1. It's got a crazy date on it. It's got all that good stuff. So what we're going to do inside the UCM, we're going to go to value added features, zero config. And then what we're going to do is we are going to use 0config to go ahead and configure this. So now, what you can do is if you know the IP address, you can just you can ping a single one. If you know, basically, you can do, any of these methods, these scan methods, but we don't know the IP. We're going to pretend we don't know the IP. So if we put 255 there, it's going to scan the entire subnet. So we're going to let it do that. A broadcast scan is running. Oh, look at this. It's finding phones. So that's funny. I had a router answer the call too. So right here is the Grandstream GXP 1625. And what we're going to do is we are going to click the edit right here, little edit button, and it's going to bring it up. It's got a nice little picture of the phone. Now what we're going to do is we're going to enable an account on this phone, and so we're going to check the box next to account. We've only got the Willie Howe set up right now, but we're going to select that, and then we can change the line keys. So we can change what those line keys say. We're going to get into all that a little later when we talk about templates and phone setup and all that. Right now, our goal is to get the account on the phone. So we check this box, we select the account, we click Save. It says data is saved successfully. And so if your phone doesn't update automatically, there's a couple of different things that you can do. Now you probably can't see the screen on this, but I'm just holding it here so I know when it is set up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little update, and it's going to send a notify to the phone. And once it sends the notify, then the phone automatically provisioned, and now I have Willie Howe here on the screen. And if I hit the voicemail button, it's asking for the voicemail password, which we haven't gone that far yet. We can look that voicemail password up. Let's see. Extensions. Now you can see that the extension is green. We are available. It shows us the IP address and port of the extension. But let's look up. We're going to click skip voicemail password verifications. And remember we talked about that earlier, where if we have that selected, then we don't need to enter our password. So we'll go ahead and click save on that and apply. And we're going to let the system save. And then once that is saved, we're going to go ahead and hit the voicemail password again.
You have no messages. Press 2 to
we have no messages. The next thing that I'm going to do is I want to talk about setting up the voicemail. We're not going to do that here. I'm going to do an entire video just setting up your voicemail, and then I've got a cheat sheet that I'm going to create, and I'm going to release that out to everybody for free, so that if you're using the UCM, you'll have a cheat sheet that shows how to very easily set up the voicemail on the system. So what we're going to do is, I think that will probably be the next video, and then we will do trunks and routes, and we'll kind of start blending all this stuff together. So that's it for this video. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe. Please comment and share. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram. If you need consulting for voice over IP, network security, networking in general, you can go to h5llc.com and fill out the contact form. We also do custom programming, captive portals, things like that. Somebody will reach back out to you. We also have a Discord channel, and the link is down there. Charlie's our admin. He does an awesome job. If you want to buy any of the products that you see here on the channel, we do have that Amazon link down below. And as always, thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next video.